Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Rebel News Daily Live Stream. I am your co-host, Sheila Gunn-Reid, and I'm also joined by my fellow Albertan, Adam Sos. He's in Calgary. Adam, how's it going? How was your Easter?
Oh, it was wonderful. How about yourself?
I was busy, kind of low-key, though. Like busy because, I'm the mom. And so preparing for Easter falls squarely on my skinny little shoulders. But it was, it was just sort of casual. We had a fire in the backyard and everybody got together. Really no different than anything we did during the entire pandemic because we didn't stop gathering together just because the government told us not to. How about you?
It was really good, actually. It was a Sunday evening. The church had a mass, and it was like normally there isn't a Sunday evening mass, so nobody knew about it. So it was like the quietest, low-key Easter mass I've ever been to. So that was pretty nice. Hang out with the family. Yeah, same old, taking it easy. Not much has changed for us people who kept on living free. So
yeah, I don't need permission from the government to live my life. That's for sure. There were a lot of things that happened over the weekend. Besides, commemorating the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, Justin Trudeau decided to commemorate the signing of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms by his father. We'll get to that in a second. We'll explain everybody what we're doing here, and then we'll get into the news of the day because Justin Trudeau, once again, fails to read the room, like completely. So this is the Rebel News Daily live stream. It's a great way for us to interact with each other because a lot of us work remotely. I'm east of Edmonton in an undisclosed location, although if you know me, you know exactly where I am, and Adam's down in Calgary. But it also gives us a chance to interact with our viewers and gives our viewers a chance to have their say, but also support the work that we do completely willingly. So if you are watching us on Getter, we're streaming there. We're streaming on YouTube for as long as we possibly can today, but in general. So there are things on YouTube that we can't talk about. So we might have to cut the YouTube feed because if we question the advice of a public health officer, that will make us run afoul of the big tech censors. If we say certain things about the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, that might also make us run afoul of YouTube censorship. So we might have to cut the feed there, but we are streaming on other places as well. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U simultaneously. And on those platforms, as Olivia has put up, you can have your say, have your message shown on screen if you leave a paid chat. And if it's a question, I will do my best to answer it. Adam, likewise. If you've got a comment, a story idea, whatever, throw it in a paid chat. On Rumble, it's called a Rumble Rant. Odyssey is a hyper chat, and there's a couple different ways that you can do that. And on Super U, it's called the Super U Shout. And again, it's a great way for you to have your say because unlike the CBC, we don't close our comment section. We do want to hear from you. But again, support us out of the goodness of your heart and out of your own free will. Unlike, again, the horrible state broadcaster CBC that Justin Trudeau just reaches into your pocket and takes your money and says, here you go, CBC. Nobody's watching you. Here's a little more money. So that's what we're doing here. Now, I alluded to Justin Trudeau commemorating the birth of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms after he's had a hell of a 2 years just stomping all over him. And I'm old enough to remember, I don't know, 6 horses stomped on a little old lady. Did I freeze up?
A little bit.
I think I froze up. Yeah, I'm frozen, whatever.
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Oh, I've come unfrozen. Okay, great. So this is Justin Trudeau. With the few strokes of a pen 40 years ago today, Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms was adopted, built around our shared values of equality, justice, and freedom. Okay. It protects the rights and freedoms that define who we are as Canadians and bring us closer as a country. And he's got a couple of tweets in this thread. It continues to do that to this very day. And as we work to build a fairer country and a better future for everyone, it's up to each and every one of us to uphold our collective responsibility to the words enshrined in the Charter. This is a guy who, 40 years later, with the stroke of a pen, seized bank accounts, and all of a sudden treated critics of his government's actions as though they were enemies of the state, like ISIS terrorists. He treated them literally under the law like you would treat a terror cell, attacking the financing, attacking the organization. People were held in jail for weeks. They're not allowed to attend other peaceful protests, by the way. This was entirely peaceful. This guy now has the audacity to say we have a collective responsibility to uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Horses trampled little ladies. Journalists were shot with pepper spray. And yet he's
canisters.
Canisters. It brings us closer as a country. Yeah, it did. I think it united us against the tyranny of Justin Trudeau. I've been to these conservative leadership events, and I think they are a direct result of being unified against Justin Trudeau. There are a ton of people when you go to these things where they're like, oh, Sheila, I was an NDP voter. Don't hate me for it. I'm like, look, I believe in redemption. Good to see you. Yeah. Or I voted for Justin Trudeau, but I saw what he did to the truckers, and there has to be a better way. You're seeing that all over the place. I think that's why Pierre Poilievre's crowds are enormous. That's why I think there's so much enthusiasm around Leslyn Lewis. You have to remember, this is a boring old leadership campaign where only the people who are allowed, the only people allowed to vote are people who are members of the party. And you are seeing crowds larger than what you would normally see during an election campaign, like 2 and 3 times larger than what you would see during an election campaign. And that energy is not so much enthusiasm for, I don't know, Pierre Poilievre, Leslyn Lewis, but enthusiasm to get rid of Justin Trudeau. And it has a lot to do with his disregard of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
You know, it's shocking the sort of level of cognitive dissonance. First of all, just Justin Trudeau generally.
Something else.
Jagmeet Singh is literally tweeting the Conservatives and the Liberals together have ramped up. He just made an alliance with the Liberals and is running a de facto sort of dictatorship over Canadians. Basically, he knows that no one's supporting Justin Trudeau anymore, but he wants to get some of his policies in. So he's willing to make a deal with the devil, even though he's wildly unpopular, to get a few things in while tweeting how terrible it is. But the degree, and some people believed it. Some people actually followed it. Most didn't. Lots showed up at NDP offices to protest. But I want to juxtapose where we haven't been cheerleaders for Jason Kenney with some of the stuff that he's been happening here. No. But there's a clear juxtaposition here between someone who at least has some of their cognitive faculties in place and has a base who holds him accountable in Jason Kenney and Justin Trudeau. Jason Kenney's not going to go around campaigning as a champion of freedom because he knows he hasn't been. Period. He's saying, look how good I did on the economy. Look at these contracts. Look at these other things. We've done some stuff to fix AHS. Look at all this other good stuff I've done. He's like, we had to do some of this bad stuff. I don't agree with him that he had to do some of that bad stuff at all, but he's not campaigning on that. He has the common sense to be like, I'm not popular on this issue, but hopefully people appreciate some of the other good stuff I've done. We've talked to lots of people who are like, Jason Kenney's probably the right guy for the job on 90% of issues, but he's flopped on freedom, and that's most important to me. That's why I can't support him. But Justin Trudeau, who makes Jason Kenney look like a freedom crusader, Justin Trudeau, who has been the #1 militant advocate for running over old ladies with horses and clamping down and freezing bank accounts and doing all of this, and furthermore generating this type of political oppression, he's inspiring people like Mayor Jyoti Gondek to do the things they're doing. It goes from the head down, the fish rots from the head down, so to speak, as we've said before. But he actually, after all that, knows that the people still supporting him and still donating to him won't dare question him out when he is flat out trampling on this charter. his father was probably the last most dictatorial type prime minister we had. He invoked martial law at a questionable time, but at the very least, there was a terrorist incident going on. At the very least, with the Fonds de Libération du Québec, there was some sort of justification for what was happening. Now, most people would say overreach. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in the legacy of Pierre Trudeau that's problematic, but he looks like a lightweight compared to dictator Justin Trudeau. He has gone so overboard. And the sort of level, like I said, of cognitive dissonance among his supporters, the entire world is
here
looking.
For a second. You're meeting the queen. You can't brush your hair. Give me anyway.
Yeah, look at her face. She's like, this is ridiculous. These people, this colony will not survive. But it just the level, people on social media being like, oh well, you shouldn't. It's not that bad. It's not like we're in China. It's not like we're in Venezuela. It's not like we're in Poland pre-war. You know what? It's not. But the people who were there are saying, be careful because this is how it starts, and you're not listening to them.
There are over 5 million Canadians right now who cannot exercise their mobility rights under that Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They can't get on a plane. They can't get on a train. They can't visit their family for Easter because we are also one of the least densely populated, if not the least densely populated country on the face of the earth, and the world's second largest. Air travel and train travel is essential to get around inside of our own country. And over 5 million of us cannot get on a plane, or they are conscientious objectors to the segregation system, so they refuse to. And this guy's prattling on about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. He's also going to regulate the internet and control who is and who isn't a journalist, by the way. We've got to sue him in court for fair treatment under the tax law because he's decided that we aren't qualified journalists and only 1% of the work we do is journalism. We were live streaming day and night from the truckers' convoy. What we do is journalism. I'm working on access to information, which is paper trail journalism. But it's not journalism that props up this authoritarian here. So then we're not journalists, which is ridiculous. And by the way, where's the overwhelming outrage from the other journalists in this country?
Yeah. You know, and the absolutely astonishing thing with this is, and I had no idea before I worked for Rebel how bad mainstream media is. It is worse than you could possibly imagine. They show up. For example, we covered 2 Leslyn Lewis events. They showed up for about 4 minutes, and they got a clip where Dr. Leslyn Lewis was kind of like backpedaling, not really, but a statement she made relating to COVID, saying no, because someone basically recharacterized what she had said and she clarified. And they filmed her in the one point where she wasn't giving this sort of epic Churchillian speech. They got her backpedaling and they filmed that. They got one shot of the crowd and left. That was the one shot they got. They didn't attend the other event. They didn't attend that. They show up for 3 minutes. They clear out. We've seen it. There was massive Cuban protests against the regime in Cuba, against the Castro and Diaz regime, Canal regime rather. And they literally were categorically, it was anti-communist. Mainstream media showed up. First of all, they only showed up for the first few minutes. They got a shot of about 10 or 12 people there before the protest started. A couple hundred people showed up apparently.
Vaccines.
Yeah, and they said that they're protesting for vaccine access. It's insane. Like, these people do not do news. We're there for 10 hours when they're there for 5 minutes. We're doing real boots on the ground journalism. And the thing that's most sickening about this is their categorical failure to report the facts accurately. We don't pretend that we're not biased and we don't bring a sort of a perspective to this. We're very upfront. Sheila and I are about our faiths, about our backgrounds, about our beliefs, but we're transparent about that. But when we do news, we do news. We don't twist the facts. We may cast our own light on them, but we don't twist the facts. We present them as they are. These other outlets simply aren't doing that. So I'll talk to friends. I made a friend online recently. He's actually an Iranian refugee. He's a PhD candidate, super smart guy. And I'm telling him about what's happening in Canada, and he can't believe it. I talked to even some of my own friends who are like, well, why are these people still protesting? And I'm like a significant percentage of Canadians can't travel, can't visit people, can't go see dying relatives, can't be there for a funeral because the government says we're not allowed to fly. We can pack into Costco's and movie theaters now, but arbitrarily we're not allowed to fly with screening measures in place. It's absolutely nonsensical. And once people start to realize this, and the job of the media is not to pepper things or indoctrinate the facts, the job of the media is to show the facts and then comment on them. That's perfectly acceptable. That's what we do. These other outlets aren't showing the facts. They literally say, well, why are people protesting? The restrictions are over. They aren't over because we're not entirely free categorically. And it's so sad that is not out there. Like the news simply isn't saying, well, the reason these people are still protesting is because people can't travel. Tens of thousands of people lost their job, never received severance, so on and so forth. The human toll, and we've sort of hugged these people, told their stories, been there with them when they're weeping after 30 years of service with WestJet, having a medical condition, almost dying from the first vaccine, their doctor telling them you're going to have a heart attack and die if you get the second vaccine. These are people who weren't activists, weren't anti-vaxxers. They had an adverse reaction. They were shown the road, fired, no severance, their lives are in shambles, and there's no consequences whatsoever for companies like WestJet. That is an extension of the mandate. Until every one of those issues is resolved, the mandates simply are not over.
Yeah, going back to your point about the mainstream media, I was at a Pierre Poilievre event. We should have the story up later on today, on Thursday at River Cree on the Enoch First Nation. They have a resort casino there. The venue was so packed they could not allow any more people into the casino, let alone the room where they were holding the event. 4,000 people. The room held, I think, 2,500 plus another 1,500 in overflow, packed to the rafters. They couldn't let anybody else up the stairs because they were worried about like capacity in a little like rafter area. And the mainstream media was there maybe 25 minutes. They missed most of the speech, but I think it was as soon as Chief Billy Morin of Enoch First Nation came out and said, you know, we should no longer be ashamed to be conservative. He called the conservatives his family. He's open, upfront, pro-business conservative who endorsed his friend, his words, Pierre Poilievre. That was when the media's like, oh, we got to get out of here, because the liberals are the white saviors of Indigenous people, whereas, you know, it sounds like the Indigenous people just want the government out of their way, as Chief Billy calls the gatekeepers of Ottawa, get them out of our way, and it's conservative policies that will allow them to do that. As soon as that started happening, you could see them tearing down their equipment because this didn't fit the narrative and they were gone. And as long, I know the mainstream media hates us, but as long as they continue to be terrible, there will always be work for people like me and Adam and Rebel News and True North and Western Standard. As long as the mainstream media continues to enforce the government narrative, there's going to be plenty of work for alternative conservative media to tell the other side of the story.
And you know what? I think the thing is, though, we can say mainstream media, the heads, the people who organize it, they may not like us. I honestly think that the journalists, to an extent, revere us, particularly old school journalists.
I think they're jealous. I think
they are,
because they're like, look how free they are. They get to talk about what they know and what they're passionate about. Yeah.
We walk in and they're asked, like, I've been at this a year and change. People will come up and say, so like, what's it like? And how do you do this? And how do you manage to cover that? And like, what's your oversight? I'm like, hey, Sheila, people are interested in this. I'm going to go do it. And you say yes. And then you make sure I don't say anything crazy, which I'm usually pretty good about. We're doing active journalism, finding stories. It's not, here's a thing to say, go stand here. Everyone's going to wear the same suit and regurgitate the exact same line. It's wild, though. One of the wildest things, I didn't see this myself, but I had several people tell me, I can't remember which outlet it is, so I won't say, but one outlet for the Calgary Pierre Poilievre event said hundreds turned up. The most conservative estimate for the Calgary event is 5,000 to 6,000. The highest estimates are 8,000.
Yeah.
And that was capacity inside. I didn't know if there's people outside pooling there. But to say hundreds, we see this at the Calgary protests as well, which we can segue into organically here. We'll see them when there are 7,000 people come out, say hundreds. When there's 500, they say about 100. I'm like, listen, and don't get me wrong, people at the protests, I've heard people at the protests say, oh, there's 20,000 people there. No, there was 7. If someone were to convince me 10, sure. There wasn't 20,000 people. Sorry to burst your bubble. But then the media says like 1,000. Like, no, there was 7,000 or hundreds when there's thousands. It's unbelievable. And it's just irresponsible reporting. And I know sometimes they're going based on the police estimates, but the police will say if there's 1,000, they'll say 600-700. They don't go so ridiculous, but
Yeah,
you can
this
see
right
the
here
size of
is
this crowd.
this I think is at River Cree because it has.
No, this is Calgary.
Was it? That looked like
Yeah,
River Cree where it had the. Oh,
that was
that's
Calgary
from,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was up there. Yeah. Hey,
Oh,
look,
yeah,
it's me.
there you are.
Yeah, packed house though, Equiplex, the massive facility there, and packed to the brim. Everyone is saying they've never seen a political event like this. Justin Trudeau probably couldn't get a crowd like this, and it's wild to see. To your point earlier, though, I do think though, for the first time in a long time, it isn't just who's going to be against Justin Trudeau. Let's settle on somebody. I actually think that there is active excitement over some of these campaigns. We saw Leslyn Lewis, for example, Dr. Leslyn Lewis, come in on the second ballot. She got the popular vote. She dominated the Western provinces. Pierre Poilievre from Calgary, he gave a speech about which bus he would take to get to which school and all that kind of stuff. That people are actively excited and attending. And I think that there is an element of, it's no longer actually just about defeating Justin Trudeau. It's about people. Justin Trudeau's created this atmosphere, and it's sad that it went away post-Harper. We had the Conservatives who were trying not to lose instead of Conservatives being like, no, I have the best ideas. Get out of my way. I'm going to fix this country. We're back to that. Conservatives who are like, no, your ideas are bad. Our ideas are best for everyone, and we're going to enact them.
We did it your horrible way for 2 years, and you ruined everybody's lives. Yeah.
So I think that there is some active excitement for the political conversation, federally at least. I think provincially we still have some of that. Well, no one's really excited about Kenny, but nobody knows who could possibly step in. But federally, at least, there is some excitement, some anticipation. Very much, though, I do think that lots of these federal candidates, Pierre and Dr. Leslyn Lewis, were pretty upfront about criticizing the attacks on freedom. Lots of other people seem to be jumping on the bandwagon now that it's popular, who said nothing this whole time, so something to watch closely. But yeah, Justin Trudeau is in no position to be celebrating the 40th anniversary. I'm sure his father is rolling over or whatever situation he's in, but he's not pleased with him, which says a lot.
You mentioned Calgary, so let's move into what's happening in Calgary still. The honking ban continues. I was in Calgary last night. I saw the signs up that apparently it's still white supremacy and terrorism to be honking your horn in downtown Calgary. They didn't hand out any fines over the weekend, but they're hunting honkers, are they not?
Yeah, so it was the same thing. I think honestly, because we were there filming, catching them handing out tickets, and it's not great optics. They're like, we're not going to hand out tickets anymore in person. So we're seeing it's the same guy last weekend and this weekend standing at that exact same spot. They're either taking pictures or writing. They seem to change every week. When we report what they're doing the next week, they'll do something slightly different. But they are documenting them, likely mailing tickets out after the fact or warnings or whatever it may be. We'll see, given how wild this government is and how militant GOT is. It's not impossible that they go after one of these people with this court injunction and try to make an example of someone else, because they've said repeatedly that if people are honking, they can actually enforce an injunction against them as a sort of criminal contempt proceeding for honking, but that they're graciously only handing out tickets instead. So hopefully they don't have the audacity to do that. But I mean, even mailing out tickets is ridiculous. But you know, this whole thing, it is so wildly unnecessary. Jyoti Gondek needs to go. She's absolutely stark raving mad.
And she just got there.
Yeah, and her popularity is plummeting. She's basically, and I wasn't in favor of the arena deal. I don't think we should be spending that much money. Then again, when you're at the Saddle Dome, it is kind of ratchet, but whatever. I'd rather have cheaper tickets than a brand new facility. I wasn't in favor of that, but they spent millions of dollars getting that deal done. And then they've now blown it up and scrapped it. And then they're now working on restriking the committee, and they're going to get a worse deal. It's like the jets. They could have got them for $2 billion less. They scrapped it, bought these terrible jets, and then 7 years later, whatever it is, they're like, you know what, we're just going to spend $2 billion more on the F-35s. That's the type of governing she's doing. It's just all she's in a and I mean it's all these counselors, they get in a mood about something and they don't care what the cost is. They're going to make an example, and that's what we're seeing here. Yeah, exactly. This entire injunction was wholly unnecessary. They 100, I mean, I can't speak for the organizers. We just cover these reports. But if they went to the organizers and said, listen, the people in this community are really upset. This is a ton of police resources. Are you open to like every 2 weeks marching instead of every week? Are you open to different routes? They probably would have compromised, because guess what? They've been willing to go to this part, go to this part. We're going to walk on this route. We're going to walk on that route. There was a million things they could have done without stifling and trampling free speech and freedom of expression and right to protest. But Geoticontic wanted to do those things. They intentionally set out to target and stifle this. And we saw it with the arbitrary enforcement, the wrongful arrest and release of Pastor Derek Reimer. This is clearly just politically motivated. And it's so bureaucratic and so inept that they keep screwing up. The cops don't know what the injunction rules are. We saw the arrest, and we can jump to this clip. Devlin Gannon, they were citing part of the injunction that's not even in the injunction during the arrest. Same thing, Pastor Derek Reimer. They thought he broke the injunction. Turned out he didn't. But let's go to this clip. Devlin Gannon was arrested. He was simply talking to police. He was shoved, effectively hauled. They arrested him so aggressively, they actually ripped, he wasn't a shirtless guy to protest. They yanked him so hard they ripped his shirt and sweater off in one go. And then one of the cops who was yanking him tripped over a 12-year-old kid and fell. And he's now saying that Devlin threw him or aggravated assaulted him. So they're charging him with that. But the footage is right there. They haven't, to the best of my knowledge, we'll touch base with Devlin, but they haven't retracted those assault charges, even though the cop just tripped and they're saying he threw him. But so he's banned from attending these protests. An independent journalist who was just there covering the thing, he's banned. So he attended in an extremely interesting fashion because he can't come in person. So Mocha and Celine were on location this weekend, and he showed up digitally. So if we can pull that clip up, it was pretty funny.
So just behind us, we have Devlin Gannon, who is an independent journalist and was arrested a few weeks ago at one of the Calgary protests.
Well, March 18th, an injunction came out, and then Devlin spent the whole night studying the injunction. And,
yeah, that's good. Just the shot of that, exactly the wagon and the cart there.
And everything was fine.
We can cut the video. That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so they had him on a cart with a TV, and he always wears the same sweater, the one they ripped off of him. So they rolled him up to this protest. It become ungovernable. But this is the type of nonsense you're seeing here. Don't get me wrong. So I understand, like there was a couple incidents where some of the counter protesters became violent and the cops had to intercede and use some force. I completely understand that. But you can go watch my interview with Devlin. It's in that tweet. I'm sure you'll be able to find it there. And it's wild to see what's happening. Completely unnecessary. There was a million peaceful solutions, but these people wanted to make an example. Yeah, that's so great there. These people wanted to make the microphone.
That's amazing.
So good.
That's so good.
Yeah. So yeah, still heading out. Good for him. But yeah, completely unnecessary. People continue to protest. It seems like the bulk of the enforcement, them keeping them away from anywhere, that's over. They're kind of being allowed to protest in City Hall. They then go for a traffic law compliant walk through town, and they've basically just moved from the Beltline to Stephen Avenue, which is a pedestrian walkway. So I guess somehow that's better. But again, sad to see this sort of ideological enforcement and targeting by these politicians, no doubt taking example from the guy who's just celebrating the signing of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Justin Trudeau. So yeah.
Before we move on to other free speech issues, as in maybe Elon Musk is going to take back the digital town square through a buyout of Twitter. But before we do, I just see a note from our store channel in Slack that says that we have new merch up in the Rebel News store. And it is great because it is for the Rebel News mom, like the mom in your life who loves Rebel News, or she is one of those ungovernable moms and maybe she believes in traditional gender roles, which is apparently an act of rebellion. Maybe she's still married to your dad. That's also an act of rebellion. Maybe she stays at home to raise her kids, also an act of rebellion. Maybe when little Johnny comes home from school and says, I'm not sure if I want to be a girl or maybe a fire engine today. She's like, Johnny, you can play make believe, but you're definitely still always my Johnny, my little boy. Also, big time active rebellion these days. So if you go to rebelnewsstore.com, you'll find a bunch of new merch, but it's not just for the rebel mom in your life. We've got Rebel Mom stuff, which I think is great, and ladies fit shirts. So if you are a lady who wears a ladies fit, I'm definitely not that lady. But if you are, there's stuff there for you. We've got baby stuff. My mom is a rebel. We've got Rebel Mom hats, hoodies. That hoodie's really nice.
That is.
But there are other stuff like Rebel Grandma.
Nice.
So, yes. I know my mother-in-law is definitely a rebel grandma. So anyways, if you go to rebelnewsstore.com, you can get a couple of things there. Maybe you want to get something for your wife and your baby, or your wife and your mom, or wife and mother-in-law. You can use the coupon code MOM25 and it'll give you 25% off the second item in the store. And there's free global shipping there. But I would suggest that if you are going to order for Mother's Day, just because we're dealing with shipping and all that good stuff, that you sort of order before the end of the month to get it to your family in time for Mother's Day. But yeah, we put a bunch of new stuff in there and I'm really excited about it because it's like, you might not know it's from the Rebel News store, but it's like a wink to the other moms out there, like, hey, I'm like you too.
And here's an idea. Go to the Rebel News store for that ultra liberal mother-in-law and get something that doesn't say Rebel on it, but you'll always know. Get something nice from the store for it. But in all seriousness, we're about a month out from Mother's Day here. Don't go to the grocery store last minute and get some kind of flowers. You can get some flowers too, but get something that means something. Going to the Rebel News store, if your grandma, if your mom, if whoever it is a Rebel News supporter, it supports us in two ways. One, it's great to have moms out there representing Rebel News, saying that they're part of this. It may even generate a conversation with some other moms who maybe aren't happy with mainstream media, lamestream media, and they want to have some different sources of information, start those conversations. But those purchases that you make there also help us do independent journalism. Unlike stealing money through your taxes, which the government does proficiently, you actually get a cool shirt out of it, and you're also supporting our independent journalism. So that's really great too. So yeah, definitely go to rebelnewsstore.com, get those orders in now, and the code is MOM25 for buy one, get one 25% off. Get a shirt for mom, get a shirt for grandma, save some money, and support.
Get one for you.
Get one for you. Yeah, I'm going to go get some. Yeah, that's awesome. There's some good stuff there. So yeah, rebelnewsstore.com.
I'm really excited to see the Rebel Mom stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll see a ton of those out at the protests because there are a lot of ladies out there who, and it's funny because it really is the moms who are leading the charge against, the gender ideology and CRT and all those creeping, pervasive things that are coming into their children's lives and seeing their children robbed of opportunities because mediocre men want to all of a sudden play girls' sports. It's the moms who are leading the charge there, as they always have, I guess. Yep.
It's amazing politicians haven't learned this. As soon as you aggravate the moms, I was going to say another word, but as soon as you get the moms involved, it's over. The McGuinty government learned that. The amount of governments that have learned that, like, once you wake up Mama Bear, ultimately you are in a world of trouble. So get the Mama Bear in your life. Yeah.
Loudoun County was the moms and the one dad, but I mean, it's when you start meddling with kids, that's when all of a sudden apolitical moms are a political juggernaut. We should move on to on the, am I frozen again? The social hellscape of Twitter. Yeah.
Let's talk Twitter hellscape.
You take it away because I'm frozen. And it's ironic because I rely on Starlink for my internet connection.
Thanks, Elon. Jeez Louise, here we are singing your praise. And so this is such an interesting situation because obviously the board from Twitter, all of whom make, I think, $200,000-$300,000 basically a year for this part-time job that they do, doing little, ultimately. They have brought on
vested interest in the company, by the way. Most of them own zero shares, don't even tweet. But okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Wild. So, and I think it's Goldman Sachs they brought on. So Goldman Sachs very recently valued shares at $30. Elon Musk is offering $54.20 to go private. This is basically like a jackpot for shareholders. So they basically voted against it. They're trying to poison pill it, which basically allows board members to buy out a bunch of the stocks. They create more stocks. They make it untenable. But basically what Elon Musk is intending to do here is have it go straight to the shareholders, have them have the capacity to vote. He's also said that if he's successful in that, he'll immediately fire the board and he will take no salary, saving Twitter $3 million a year. So a very interesting circumstance here. But, and Ezra's talked about this, you've talked about this, it's so apparent and so glaring that what they're not willing to let go of is, because from a business perspective, a $30 share, you're being offered $54. You're not going to double that kind of growth in years. It's just from a business perspective, it's what this is about is control. They're like, we want to be able to control the message out there. We don't want a diversity of opinions. We don't want an open square. We want Tiananmen Square. And we don't care if it's billions of dollars. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in controlling this. They are showing their cards. And that's one thing, whatever you may think of Elon Musk, he's definitely good at forcing people with all that money of his to show his cards. Also one of the few people who's made a ton of money and then does some interesting things with it instead of sitting on it. Very interesting to see what's gonna shake out with this. I know recently he was interviewed, and I think it was a TED Talk, and he basically said even with the poison pill plan, he's got alternatives. I think he's already talking about the intention. So the intention with the poison pill, Plan B, speaking of the poison pill, but the intention with that is to make it untenable for him to be able to afford it. But I imagine, and this is just me sort of spitballing, but I imagine he's already talking with additional investors who would, in the interest of free speech, be willing to outbid their poison pill strategy by bringing some other people in to the private ownership. But it remains to be seen what's going to happen there. But it's such an evident sort of ideological bid here to protect their platform, their soapbox, their capacity to restrict the ideas that are out there. And we're talking about billions and billions of dollars that they're willing to not make to protect this platform for themselves and their ideas.
Well, and that's the thing about Twitter is, like a lot of people say, who cares about Twitter? We shouldn't care about Twitter, but Twitter is where headlines are made and broken. It's where the journalists meet. And that's why I guess they're so censorious over there, is because we don't want to have journalists have their feelings hurt when the public says to them, you got this story wrong, you're awful. That's why there's so many rules about harm on Twitter. It's because the public can actually speak directly to a journalist there and tell them exactly what they think of how bad they got the story. And so that's one of the reasons why they're so, like, the board is so uptight about Twitter, is it plays such an important role, even though it's a dying platform, because normal people are getting off of it. But it, like any cult, and unfortunately I'm part of it, I guess, but the normal people leave, but the true believers stay behind. The more radical, they stay behind, and they continue to reinforce their own opinions. And I'm sort of in there still grinding against all of it. But as the normals leave, this becomes, the power continues to be concentrated in this space where all the decisions about what stories are going to be aired and what narrative is going to play out, that's where it's happening, unfortunately, is on Twitter. And so that's why they don't want to release the stranglehold on it, and allow a more diverse viewpoint happening there. And former Twitter CEO, who continues to look like some sort of cult leader, speaking of cult leaders, Jack Dorsey, he came out against all of this. He's slamming the company that he once ran, the board of directors, in a tweet over the weekend, which comes as entrepreneur Elon Musk, the world's richest man, offered $43 billion to buy the company. Dorsey was responding to the following tweet when he made his remark. Look into the history of the Twitter board, it's intriguing, as I was a witness on its early beginnings, mired in plots and coups, and particularly amongst Twitter's founding members. I wish if it could be made a Hollywood thriller one day. Okay, but thanks for nothing. Why are you saying this now when you don't, you can't fix it? You oversaw this. sinister cabal of censorious weirdos. You didn't do anything about it when you had the power to do it, and so now you're safely outside of it and rich, and now you're a critic of it. Give me a break. Yeah, thanks for showing up, Jack.
I think he is on the board still, because someone asked about that and he said, I technically can't even be saying this. I don't care anymore.
Oh, right. Yeah.
One thing that one positive we can take from this, though, is look at all these politicians now jumping the bandwagon towards freedom. It inspires some hope that freedom might be on the horizon. Jack smells the blood in the water, and he's trying to get back on the ship, and Elon's currently running the SpaceX ship. I think at the very least we can take from this, Dorsey, I think, is probably self-serving in this sentiment. Maybe not. Maybe he's thinking he might have something to do with Elon when it gets going again. But I think at the very least we can hopefully take something from this. But I do want to talk about this sort of, and if we can pull up, I think, was it MSNBC where the panel was sitting around talking, saying it's their job. If we can pull up that clip, if not, we can talk about it. But we saw this ridiculous juxtaposition of the Wall Street Journal articles about when Bezos, I think, bought Wall Street Journal, right? And they were saying that it's like a brave new era and all this positivity, and it's a open up to new channels and And then Elon Musk goes to buy Twitter, and it's like, an attack on freedom and a descent into darkness.
Yeah.
It's this, you're taking the richest people in the world and they're buying communications outlets and news outlets, whatever it may be. And depending on whether he owns your outlet or not, it's good news or it's bad news. It's pretty shocking. But there is this clip from MSNBC where they're sitting around saying how Trump. Yeah, got it. Okay, let's run that.
And Tesla CEO Elon Musk, who has made a $43 billion offer for Twitter to, quote, build an arena for free speech. Musk has accused Twitter of censoring its users. Are you concerned that what Musk is trying to do is to open up the platform for more misinformation about topics such as COVID-19 and the 2020 election, and perhaps even allow former President Trump to get his account back?
I mean, I'm going to be honest. Elon Musk is a danger to Twitter and to freedom of speech. He has been known to say some of the most transphobic and homophobic things to his millions of followers. So creating an arena for hate, to me, that's what that sounds like.
We can cut it there. There was another.
To have no consequence.
There's another one. I found it. It was,
okay.
I think Twitchy had it. And basically she says, it's our job to control exactly what people think.
Yeah, they're basically saying Elon Musk is trying to control what people think, and that's our job as the mainstream media. It's absolutely wild. And that's one thing that I find so interesting is I think you're sending that over probably. Elon Musk, he's such a juxtaposition because he's kind of out there. He's a capitalist, but his companies are very often considered green and very popular among liberals. He's progressive in many policies, but then he's also a very big advocate for freedom of speech. So he's an interesting sort of conversation generator because he doesn't fit into any of these boxes for people. People love his products but hate him, or love him but hate his products. And it's interesting because lots of the people who don't like his ideologies like his products, and lots of people who might be in support of his position on free speech probably don't really care for Tesla and think it's silly.
I'm in the second.
Yeah,
I'm in the second silo there.
Yeah. So I find that so absolutely interesting. But yeah, they're saying, oh, he's trying to control free speech. That's our job. We're the ones who are supposed to give you the ideas. And you could see her as she's saying that in that clip, sort of. Yeah, do we have that now?
I sent it over, Livy. Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect.
Here we go. This is it.
Who were Trump voters and are still Trump supporters. They go, yeah, you guys are going crazy. He's doing, what are you so surprised about? He's doing exactly what he said he's going to do.
Well, and I think that the dangerous, edges here are that he's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts. And it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think, and that is our job.
Yeah, if you look at the issues, Yamisha's
she
right.
just
He's
slides
doing
it right
exactly
in there.
what he
Hey,
said. It's
and that is our job. And afterwards, she's like, "Should I? Yeah, no, it's probably fine. That is our job. That's not actually our job. Our job is to be like, here's some facts, here's what we think about it. What do you think about it? And that's exactly the crux of it. That reveals everything. Twitter, it should have been a platform where people can present their ideas. This is what YouTube used to be as well. Everyone can present their ideas, and as long as they don't violate sort of hate crime laws, people can weigh in on them, and they get downvoted and hated if they're bad, and upvoted and retweeted and all that if they're good. And it's very much the public platform for exchange of ideas. It is the public square, except online, because that's where we're moving. And 100%, there are certain limitations, like inciting violence, inciting hatred, all those types of things. But that's not what they're talking about. What they want to do is groupthink. They want to control your thoughts entirely. And they view this stranglehold of Twitter as one of the sort of staples of their control on your thoughts. And when you see people out there, to go back to our conversations from so far this morning, saying, well, the media tells me the mandates are over. The media tells me only a couple hundred people showed up. The media tells me that Justin Trudeau's a defender of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The media tells me this, that, and the other thing. But the majority of things from people who just consume mainstream media that they hold to be true is rather evidently and evidenced as not true when you look at the world objectively, when you go out and cover these things for yourself. It's the sentiment that we've heard time and time again from people at these protests is they're like, I'm vaccinated and I'm for vaccination personally, but I don't think other people should be, or whatever it may be. They're saying, come out to these things for yourself, talk to people, don't believe the one clip of the one more extreme guy at a rally that the news hand selected to feed their narrative. Come out and check out the facts for yourself. Come out to a rally for yourself. Go down to, I mean, I'm not endorsing this for the police, but go down and talk to the people at Coots or Milk River. Get the opinions first hand, or watch a media outlet that puts cameras on them and lets them speak for themselves. Don't just inhale everything that is being pumped out by a homogenous, unified media that's all saying the same thing at the same time in coordination, inorganically.
Yeah, it's all very boring and gray. Speaking of lockdowns continuing, there's no greater example of this than what's about to happen this week in court. Our friends at Church in the Vine in Edmonton, Pastors Tracy and Rodney Fortin, they are facing, I think collectively between Tracy and the church, 6 counts. I think 3 and 3 maybe, of obstruction of a public health officer. They face up to $500,000 in fines. And their crime is not, now they've never had an outbreak in the church, so they were no danger to public health. Time has shown that to be true. Their crime was not allowing a public health officer into the church, or a public health inspector, I should say, into the church during services to inspect for COVID compliance. So they said, come before, come after, but you're not coming to interrupt the sanctity of our worship services. They are facing in excess of $1 million. But you know, it could be around $500,000 in fines for Tracy, but also for the church. And so for people who say, oh, we're free, the lockdowns are over. No, 5 million people can't fly. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs because of vaccine mandates. And this church, who did nothing wrong except protect, see, they're not against, they just said, don't come during services. They didn't obsessively police their congregation for compliance. They said, these are the rules. They're here. Follow them if you were gonna. But they didn't obsessively police the church. And they said, you can't come and barge in when we're worshiping. For that, they're on trial 3 days this week. And I'll be covering that like it's the OJ trial. But and Jason Kenney could put a stop to this tomorrow, but he's not. He's wasting taxpayer resources on this through prosecution, and he's doing his best to wring those fines out of this nice, friendly church. The nicest people. They had me in their home. They're so nice. It's just terrible that they have to deal with this.
You know, the lawlessness here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, the second that the court affirms these charges, they need to go arrest the health inspector, because it's section 1762, violation of the Criminal Code of Canada. And if they say that they're guilty of preventing them from accessing church during worship, that's legal confirmation that that the health inspector broke the law, the Criminal Code of Canada. It's ridiculous. And it's so sickening to see that time and time again, without fail, if anyone out there thinks that the government in this country, whether it be provincial or federal, is not discriminatory towards Christians, you are absolutely in a cult of denial. Because we literally went out to other denominations and they had massive gatherings that far surpassed what we saw in Pastor Artur Pawlowski's church, let's say. No enforcement whatsoever. I literally saw cops parked in the parking lot of one of the churches. It wasn't actually a Christian church, but one of the places of worship, while there were hundreds of people inside. A couple blocks away, 5-minute drive from Pastor Artur Pawlowski's church, where 50 people maybe gathered. No enforcement whatsoever. It's just all the way across Canada, time after time, the unifying factor for this targeted discrimination is they are attacking Christians. That is what this is about. And it's no longer deniable. It's no longer a maybe. It's no longer, well, they were just enforcing health measures. These people knowingly and actively went out and targeted a religious community in this country, and it's insane. It is absolutely sickening that this is what this country has come to, and it's entirely unforgivable. It absolutely must stop. And it needs to start with one of these cases. One of these politicians needs to have the cojones to step up. And I'm still hoping it might be Jason Kenney. I doubt it. But to say enough is enough. This is ridiculous. Take to the microphone and say 15 religious organizations were arrested or charged or targeted. 15 were Christian. We know for a fact other groups are doing this. The government has engaged in discrimination. All charges are being dropped. That's the only way that there can be a recovery from this. And it's the only way, for the sake of those people's souls, that they can do what is right, because this is targeted persecution on a level that hasn't been seen since the internment of the Japanese, honestly, during the World War. I can't think of a time in history where a group of people is so overtly targeted and imprisoned in Canada.
I think there's a particularly strong vindictiveness against Church in the Vine, because Church in the Vine then went systematically about writing religious exemptions. Now, they interviewed the people they were writing religious exemptions for so that they continue to attend their job or pursue their higher education. They did that because they thought that nobody should be, at the end of the day, for some of these people, persecuted for their faith. And when you have to choose between your job or your faith, that's a level of persecution. And so I think because of that, they are an additional target by the government, because really, what's the crime here? What did Tracy do? What did this church do that will constitute $500,000 in fines? And they really don't argue that they didn't stop the inspectors. They just said, we stopped the inspectors to prevent a wide-scale charter breach of everybody in attendance at the church. So how could we not do that?
And I think,
this is $500,000 for inconveniencing an inspector. That's what it is.
And inconveniencing an inspector who was about and attempting to commit a crime. Literally interrupting worship in progress is a criminal code offense, punishable by fines and I think imprisonment as well, actually. So they stopped someone from breaking the law, and now they're facing these fines. And the entire basis of the judicial process is to prove that they indeed did stop someone from breaking the law. It's even hard to fathom that we've come to this so quickly, and it speaks to a general anti-Christian sentiment within the country. It's manifest. We've seen so many things become worse and manifest, but looking even at this past weekend, a number of people I know mentioned to me that they were watching news outlets and they heard things like very blessed Passover, blessed Ramadan, and everyone enjoyed the Easter bunny. It's blessed. Happy Easter. This is a rant as old as time. But how long ago was it that people? How long ago was it that we were arguing and talking about? Well, it's fine to say Merry Christmas. Everyone was like, oh well, you're getting all wound up about nothing. And Easter, it's just about the Easter bunny. We talk about appropriation. Well, society has appropriated and misappropriated all Christian religious holidays, and it's manifested that anti-Christian sentiment or the reappropriation or the belittling of Christianity that no one dares do. I saw people on Twitter who are relative moderates making zombie Jesus jokes. I'm looking forward to the Ramadan and Passover Passover jokes.
Yeah.
Oh no, those aren't going to come whatsoever, because there's an underlying sentiment that's been permitted in this country that you have to be respectful of all religions, but you can bash Christians nonstop and you have to show no reverence for them in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, because they are simply fair game. It's nothing new in history. It's been happening for 2,000 years. We were told that it would happen in the scriptures as well, but it is manifest so troublingly in these arrests, in this ongoing persecution that we're seeing presently. And the mandates certainly aren't over. Pastor Artur Pawlowski, again, happy to be home, happy to be with his family, but under extremely strict house arrest conditions that serious criminal offenders don't get. Church in the Vine being targeted simply for standing by their faith, standing by their principles, when other denominations were not. They were just left alone, and it's troubling. Sheila, a question for you, if you don't mind. Where do you see this going? What's the end result of this trajectory we're on, and how did it get so bad?
Well, you sort of alluded to it. I think this has always been, we've gone from tossing Christians in with the lions to burning them at the stake to any number of things, chasing them into the caves. Father Max Kolbe, he ended up in a concentration camp, traded his life for another prisoner. This is just, as you say, what we were promised. Like, it wasn't like, oh, this could happen to you. This is what we were promised. But as Christians, we know that in the end, God always wins. And so the trials and tribulations of Christians, that's part of the deal. That's the thing that we sign up to do. And as Catholics, we know that there's benefit in suffering. I just finished Lent. I didn't eat meat the whole time. And so we know that our suffering is supposed to bring us closer to Christ, and it's a powerful thing. And it's an important thing in growing our faith. And so, it's not good. But it is, it was the thing that we signed up to do. But in the end, God always wins.
Yeah. And that's the thing, when you push Christians underground into caves, a couple of days later, the rock rolls away. So we'll be back. Part of it's frustrating for non-Christians because we're supposed to turn the other cheek, right? And so often we do. We are the low-hanging fruit. You can make fun of Jesus and we're like, you know what? I'm probably going to pray for that guy. Might have a bake sale if we get really radical. But we're not, we're not going to react violently. Very rarely we react violently to criticisms of our faith. It's annoying. We don't like it. We're probably going to whip out some apologetics on you. But that's the worst we get up to. And it's hardwired into the faith that we turn the other cheek and we love our enemy. And so for our enemies, it gives them license to continue to stomp all over us. But as I said, God always wins. Yeah, that he does.
Yes. Okay, we should get to some of these chats because we have 3 minutes left in the show, and I didn't even get to the thing that I wanted to talk about from Blacklocks, where the climate lockdowns are obviously coming because I see the federal government is like, oh, we locked them down for 2 years and emissions dropped. So we dealt with this emergency with a lockdown and emissions dropped. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to deal with the climate emergency that way too, because that's the one where we really want the emissions to drop. And so we did this thing of controlling and we got this result. We did it under the guise of a virus, but let's do it for this other thing. And it's not good. You
and I 8 months ago, 9 months ago, whatever, said that they're as soon as these lockdowns are over, we said this was going to happen. I'm very much looking forward to, in 5 years or so, Kian throwing together a highlight reel of the 582 times that we said what was going to happen a year before it happened. Then it happened every single time. He's going to make us look outright prophetic, because this stuff is so self-evident and so glaring. And until Justin Trudeau and his buddy, his queen, so to speak, Jagmeet Singh, and their reign of terror are over, this is going to continue. So let's do some chats.
As my friend Kathy Shadle used to always say, we don't have a crystal ball. we have crystal brains, and these people are highly predictable. You don't have to be all that smart to see this stuff coming down the pipe at you. Okay, let's get to some of these chats because we're well over. We've got $5 from Fraser. That's Fraser McBurney, a Hamilton Fight the Fines recidivist. Don't forget the Canadian Bill of Rights, 1960, John Diefenbaker. The Canadian Bill of Rights was the country's first federal law to protect human rights and fundamental freedoms. The Bill of Rights was passed in the House of Commons in 1960. That is true. And it also gave our Indigenous peoples the franchise. Western-based conservative prime minister led the charge for full rights for Canada's Indigenous people. So I don't know where these liberals get off thinking that they are the white saviors of Canada's Indigenous people. They're the ones behind the residential schools. The last residential school was administered under the Liberal government by Jean Chrétien, who was Indian Affairs Minister at the time, and he's still alive. So why aren't people bashing down his door? Don't do that quite seriously, but why aren't they accosting him and sticking a microphone in his face saying, hey, what do you have to say about this? No, it's the church, it's conservatives, it's whatever. But the guy behind the last residential school, he's still alive. Go ask him some questions.
Or the son of the guy who ran them extensively and still can't provide clean drinking water, despite literally using them as tokens to campaign repeatedly all the time, but then does nothing for them.
Anyways, that's why I think the Liberals should be very scared about what happened in Edmonton with Chief Billy Morin. Very, very worried. Very worried. He's very popular, very charismatic. And he looks at Edmonton. I love Chief Billy because he looks at Edmonton and he's like, oh, what's their property tax rate at? What's their business tax rate at? Oh, Enoch, which butts up against the city, we're going to be just a little bit lower. And so he's snagging all these businesses to his industrial park. And I think it's just brilliant. Do what they're doing better.
Yeah. Unlike all these sort of white savior academics and Twitter pundits and politicians who've probably never been out to talk to these people on their reserve, the sentiment generally is very anti-government. They don't trust the government and they want less government, and they're overtly critical of Justin Trudeau. They literally, the Trudeau government parades out the same 2 or 3 people in very racist fashion as their sort of Indigenous tokens, and is no way representative of the Indigenous bulk of the population, who, unlike these Antifa people who call me racist or whatever, I've actually been out there and talked to them and visited them, and we did the church replacement thing. So I've actually talked to these people, and they're not happy with this government.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure residential schools, was a lot motivated by the government knowing what you should do within your own family and then taking control of that. It's hard to say on one hand that you're against the mentality that led to a residential school, but then you're pro the government telling you what values you can teach your kids and whether or not you can see your grandparents and what church you should go to and how you should believe. I'm pretty sure those are like the same problem, but whatever. Boozy69 gives us $5. Rebel News, your coverage of the Freedom Convoy has been tremendous. Thank you. My daughter was in Florida over the weekend, and she met some dads that were there. She's at a sporting event, and she met some dads there who had seen our coverage, and she didn't say oh my, that's my mom, but they were I don't know, maybe I wouldn't say she's embarrassed, but she's a teenager, right? She doesn't want she doesn't care about what I do for a living or whatever, but they're she was talking to some dads who were there, and they were talking about Rebel News coverage from the Freedom Convoy from Ottawa and from Coots. That was in Florida. It was in Tampa. So good job to
John
us,
Brown from Fox said he was in a bar in, I think, Washington or Seattle or something with the Save Archer shirt that I took the picture for. And people came up and started talking about Archer and Rebel News and everything right away. They didn't know who he was, but right away they knew the story and started talking about it. So it's international. Someone's got to do the mediating.
Yeah, well, and the Trudeau government says we're not real journalists, but could you tell me one story that CBC would have covered that they would know about in Florida, that some dads in Florida would be talking about?
Yeah.
Sure.
We must do a lot of content, because if only 1% of what we do is news, there's a lot of, it must be really good, because we have a big viewership internationally and everyone seems to know our coverage on this. So it must be really good 1%, or maybe they're wrong with their numbers, maybe.
JPH 1944 gives us a buck. Where are your store items made? China, Bangladesh, or Canada? You know what? I wish I knew that. Adam, do you have one of our shirts around there? I wish I knew. I know that generally we try our best to source in Canada. I'm sure Adam's got a shirt there. He's going to check for you. Keep going. Fraser McBurney gives us $5. Sunday we held our small protest against the emergency mandates. Bill 100 forbids protest, so we're going to hold an education rally. It's not a protest. We should become a little bit more engaged on Bill 100 in Ontario, by the way. And Fraser gives us another $5 and says, when I'm out shopping, this is the crazy thing I do. I'm a chatty person, so when I chat with a mom or grandmother, I buy a small bouquet of yellow roses. And when we exit the store, I give them to her and say, the yellow rose of Texas. We laugh, and it brightens the day. Oh, that's very nice, Fraser. That's very kind. Did you find your shirt?
I'm back. So so it's from the company Gildan, most of the shirts we use, which are non-sweatshop. So that's definitely something that's addressed from that company. They're actually different depending where they bring them in, but I know some of them are imported from Mexico. But I think there's different locations. But I know Gildan is one of those companies that has a strong anti-sweatshop policy. And then as far as where they're pressed, I don't know that off the top of my head, but
we do actively try to source things closer to home if we can.
For sure.
And it's a tough balance because of supply chain issues and things like that. But we do, and Gildan is obviously not sweatshop, so that's important to us. We don't want to participate in human slavery.
For people out there, the other thing with our shirts, I'm a total snob for shirts. I'm really picky with shirts. They are a good quality material. They're a nice cut. The female cuts, women's cuts are good as well. But they actually, if you're worried about quality, they are sort of the better spun quality shirts, and they do last. And the iron on, I wash them inside out. It stays on really well. But I'm picky with shirts.
I don't take care of them at all. If I can't throw it in with my coveralls, then I'm probably not going to buy it. And everything washes up fine. I never flip my shirts inside out, and the logo stays on. It's not peeling. It's fine. And they keep their shape, Yeah,
they're good.
And
rebelnewsstore.com.
Yeah, rebelnewsstore.com, and it's buy one get one 25% off. That's the entire store, by the way. So get something for yourself, but also get something for mom or grandma or mom and baby or mom and little ones, whatever. It's a great way to support the work that we do. So, thank us for advocating for your mom. Why don't you do that? Yeah. Thank the moms at the company like me by buying a shirt, and you get a little something for yourself. So I think that's great. Yeah. And again, the coupon code is MOM25. And I think we're all caught up, Adam, I think. That's everything. I am back in the chair tomorrow. Maybe not, though, because I might be in court with Church in the Vine. But I think it's David and me, or David or somebody else tomorrow. Adam, thanks so much for being my co-pilot on the show today. I appreciate that.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. Thank you to everybody in the office in Toronto, including the people that you don't often see or hear us thanking, like the web team. They make sure that you have all the relevant links to be able to watch the things that we do. So thank you to them, and thank you to everybody who pitched in to keep the lights on. We couldn't do any of this without you. We know that you work hard for your money, and you make the choice to support us, and we appreciate that. We realize you have a lot of choices out there and inflationary pressures, as it were. So thank you for that. We'll see everybody back here. So you'll see one of us, somebody. We'll be here tomorrow. I just might not be me. And as David Menzies always says, stay sane.
I just want to say that I have had my 3 shots, and I'm a big supporter of vaccines. I got the vaccine as soon as I could, but I also know people who didn't want the vaccine or that are unvaccinated, and I think that the fact that these people are banned from flying inside Canada when, with the different variants, it has shown that the vaccine works more to reduce the severity of the illness rather than transmission. I don't think that's something that is very fair. I think if you're going to have a mandate in place, you have to have alternatives such as testing. And for me, it just makes me really uncomfortable to think that certain Canadians are banned from simple aspects of public life just because they made a different medical decision. I just want to say that I have